a deeper dive now into the work of organizing, we're joined by Katie Wilson, who's the General Secretary of the Transit Riders Union here in Seattle. Katie, welcome.
Thank you, Eric.
So tell us about the Transit Riders Union and what you all do.
Well, we're the Transit Riders Union, so we organize transit riders. We're a membership organization, and we meet every month and decide what campaigns we want to take on. We've been around for around 6 years. We've done a lot of work around making the public transit system affordable and accessible to everyone. And in the last couple of years, we've sort of broadened our horizons and begun to work on issues from progressive taxation to housing and homelessness.
So you were describing to me before the cameras started rolling how when you and a few others started to get this organization off the ground around 2011, by your own admission, you didn't really know what you're doing, right? You were kind of figuring it out as you went along.
Yep.
In the early years of the union's work, how did you, what did you have to learn? What did you have to figure out? And what did you learn the hard way?
Yeah, school of hard knocks. You got to be prepared to fail and fail and fail if you want to do this work successfully. Yeah, organizing. I would say maybe the best way to explain what organizing is to contrast it with a couple of other things that you need to do to win campaigns. So. One thing is coalition building, right? So if you have an organization, if you want to do something big, you probably can't do it alone. So you need to reach out to other organizations that might have, similar vision or mission, and put together a coalition that can get something done. But of course, just a list of organizations isn't enough to get anything done either. So you actually need, if you're trying to get something, trying to get the city to do something or the county to do something, you need to demonstrate that there's really strong public support, that a lot of people are watching and want to see this happen. And so another thing that you do is you mobilize. You have, get on the megaphone and reach out to the people in your orbit, say, come out to this meeting at City Hall, come out to this event, email, call your council members. So coalition building and mobilizing, really important things to win campaigns, but that's not organizing. That's sort of shifting around the forces that already exist. It's important, you need to do that, but organizing is something different. Organizing is, on the one hand, bringing in new people. So that's going out, talking to people on the street, knocking on doors, and talking to people who might not agree with you, people who are not part of any organization. It's really about building new power and also really just building new civic infrastructure. And that's something that I think is particularly important today when people are connected in a lot of superficial ways. But I would say that the vast majority of people are not really deeply involved in civic organizations that have the power to put forward and push through policies. So
when the Transit Riders Union was getting going, one of the first fights that you dived into was to try to preserve the downtown free ride zone, right?
Yep.
Tell me how that went and what you learned from that initial experience and kind of what you did with the learnings from it.
Sure. So we went out there and talked to transit riders downtown. We did a petition and had people sign this petition. Got thousands of signatures. And when we started, we didn't even
on the last day of when the free zone was going to end, right? You all did a big public.
We did a funeral march. Yeah, funeral march down Third Ave. And we presented our petition to Larry Gossett, came down from the county council to receive our petition. And we didn't win that campaign, but what we did was build a lot of momentum that ended up allowing us to win the low-income reduced fare, the Orca Lift program. And so I think we learned a lot about the mechanics of organizing from that campaign. When we'd first started out, we didn't even realize, like, when you talk to someone, you got to try to get their contact information so you can follow up with them and invite them to a meeting or an event, right? We just thought, like, oh, you just put the word out and people do things. So I think we had a lot to learn about just how active you have to be and how much initiative you have to take in really bringing people into a movement and creating the space where people can learn about an issue and come to see it as their issue, and really become committed to a cause.
But it's also, even at the most tactical level you're describing, if you take step one, you already have to have step 2 or 3 in mind, right? If you got people in the first place to show up, not only capturing their name and their contact info, but giving them a couple of things they could do next, right?
Yes, yep.
So what were some of those early examples when you realized, holy cow, we got a lot of people here, we should give them something else to do?
Yeah, that's hard. And I mean, another example of that is, last year after Trump got elected, there was all this energy of people like, I want to do something, I want to do something. Out of that, we were able to sort of capture some of that energy, and we partnered up with the Economic Opportunity Institute and built the Trump-Proof Seattle Coalition, and ended up winning the first municipal, progressive income tax, the first income tax in Washington State in over 80 years. That was a case where we had all these volunteers who wanted to do something, and the challenge for us was how do we use all this energy and really direct it toward a goal. We got people emailing, calling council members. We organized town halls in every district, working with some other grassroots organizations, and really got volunteers engaged in organizing those events and in reaching out in their neighborhoods to bring people into this effort.
Now, I know a lot of what's currently on the plate for you at the Transit Riders Union are larger issues of taxation in the city, and we'll get to that in a second. But back to the kind of core work around transit, a lot of that is neighborhood-based, place-based, right? Questions about bus service or about places in the city where there's a particularly high proportion of people who need and use mass transit.
Yeah.
Tell me how you think about these questions of organizing in a place-based way, right? Because the identity of transit rider, it transcends all neighborhoods, and yet when you get right down to it, it really is rooted in place in some ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, often people will contact us because they have a particular concern with their bus route or bus stops in their neighborhood, and so we've done a lot of supporting people and groups in neighborhoods to try to get those issues sorted out. But there's, I think, also a bigger sense in which the work that we do is geographically based, because we're fighting for political things. So we're trying to get the city council to do something, or the county council to do something, or sometimes the state legislature to do something. That means that we're really targeting, putting pressure on elected officials, and their districts are geographic, right? So if we're trying to get the city to pass some kind of legislation, there's 7 city council districts, and so we're organizing people on that district basis to put pressure and support behind their elected official to vote yes or to champion some piece of legislation.
So right now, as we sit here, you're in the midst of this debate that is not just local news, it's national news about what you're calling the progressive, tell me, the progressive business tax.
Progressive business tax. It has many names, but that's one of them.
And the opponents are calling it the jobs tax or the head tax. Yep. Putting aside the questions of framing and the language there, tell me how you're going about trying to organize, by your definition, people who aren't currently participating, to participate in this particular fight around taxes in order to fund affordable housing and services for the homeless.
Sure. So, one of the tools that we use and that I think is a sort of a standard organizing tool is a petition, an organizing petition. So we go out on the street, go to events, stand on the street corner, talk to people, get them engaged in this issue, and then if they support it, they sign our petition. We invite them to, give us their email address, phone number, and then we follow up with them and try to get them, more engaged in the campaign. Try to get them emailing, calling council members, try to get them to come to our events. And that's really how we grow. And the thing about organizing is that, when you're doing a campaign, that doesn't always feel like the best use of your time. Often just mobilizing, getting on the megaphone, putting stuff on Facebook, doing email blasts, it feels a lot easier. Organizing is hard work. It's slow. It can feel sometimes like searching for a needle in a haystack, right? You go and you talk to 100 people, and maybe only a handful actually get involved. So it doesn't always feel like the thing that you should be doing, but it's so important because that's the only thing that really grows your organization, that grows a movement, so that the next campaign you take on, you're starting from a stronger position. It's the real work that needs to be done.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for telling us about your take on the question of organizing. And I guess the very last thing I want to say, because we're almost out of time here, or ask is, rewind if the you of 2011 walked in here, right, and you're like, okay, Katie, don't make these mistakes, right? Or if there's a viewer out there who's thinking, I want to get involved in organizing, what are the first 1 or 2 or 3 things you would tell that person who knows nothing about organizing except has a desire to want to get engaged? What would you tell them to do, real quick?
Wow, that's a big question. I mean, I think that just persistence is the most important thing. I mean, there's a lot of different qualities, I think, that can make someone a successful organizer, but the most important thing is that, like, this is the thing that you're going to do, and you're going to figure it out. So just keep trying. That's the big message, I think.
That's great. Katie, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
My guest today has been Katie Wilson. She's the General Secretary of the Transit Riders Union here in Seattle.